Good morning. Having some exciting technical difficulties on my computer, so I'm here by my phone. And good morning, Joe.
Good
We'll give
morning.
we'll give folks a minute to join. I made you a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen, which is always the hardest part of the 9:30 call. But good morning as folks are joining us. Good to see folks. As we get started this morning, we do have a sharing the mic call this week. So if you have any topics or questions or announcements or anything like that, please just you can let me know ahead of time. You can let me know that day. But we're excited to continue that part of our 9:30 call kind of weekly schedule to have a sharing the mic at least once a week. And so, Joe, I'll turn things over to you. As many 9:30 callers invited guests, we were on a webinar, we were at a meeting, and Joe shared information about their recent poll. So I invited him to come back to the 9:30 call. So, Joe, just a little bit about you, how you came to be in your current role, and then we're looking and a little bit of an FFYF, and then we're excited to hear your update.
That sounds good. Thanks, Amy, for having me back on. It's good to be back on to share some new national polling with you all. As Amy said, my name's Joe O'Hearn. I'm with First 5 Years Fund. We are a national advocacy organization just focused on birth through five childcare and early learning issues. So we are very spoiled. We get to focus just on childcare and early learning, birth through five at the federal level. So we try to continue to do our work to make sure that federal lawmakers are hearing about childcare, hearing about early learning issues, and continuing to increase appropriations and approve quality programs. So we do that work, and a lot of the work that we do for that is supported by a lot of the polling that we do. So, assuming everyone can see my screen all right.
Yeah. And Joe, we just should thank you and everyone at First 5 Years Fund for keeping us all up to date over the past few months and beyond. But most especially over the past few months, we've been using the resources from First 5 Years Fund to just stay up to date. So thank you.
Of course. I'm glad they're helpful. So right after Trump's inauguration, we did some new national polling. And we did this actually with a pretty respected Republican pollster. Given the new trifecta here in DC, we wanted to make sure that we were getting polling that was going to be helpful for our efforts in lobbying and advocating for early learners here in DC. So worked with the National Pollster. We also oversampled GOP primary voters. I think not surprising to most folks, a lot of GOP members are worried about what their base has to think and has to say right now. So we want to make sure that we were giving them and having the tools necessary to advocate for early learning programs. So we did a national poll right after the inauguration. We oversampled GOP primary voters, and this was all done end of January. Um, some of the big takeaways: there was strong support for quality childcare and quality childcare policies among registered voters and among GOP primary voters. Tax credits were a popular initiative to help parents with the challenges they're facing around childcare. They're talking about taxes up here in DC, so wanted to make sure we had good data around taxes to make sure childcare is part of that conversation. Voters want to see action, and how we talk about childcare, especially with GOP primary voters, matters. It's important to make that cost of living economic argument, really draw that direct line by helping. This is a way that help families afford the ever-growing cost of raising a family. So, let's see if it'll go the right way. There we go. So this is a whole lot of policy proposals on childcare and early learning. I know the text is really small, we'll make sure to send around afterwards, but expanding the CDCTC, which is so properly named, great name, easy, rolls off the tongue. The Child Independent Care Tax Credit was one of the most popular proposals that we tested to help families afford childcare and early learning. That had a total of 86% support nationally, with 81% among GOP primary voters. Our pollster was a little blown away because trying to get GOP primary voters this supportive of anything is usually a challenge. And so seeing numbers like this were a huge help. Um, we even went out of our way to try to test funding and appropriations for early learning against concerns around national debt. And even facing that kind of pushback, 75% of voters wanted President Trump and Republicans in Congress to prioritize early learning programs. And that was true among even 58% of GOP primary voters. So even when facing some of the issues around national debt and deficit, people are supportive of childcare and early learning programs across the board. Doesn't matter if you're a D or an R. So, and just to reiterate that, you can see that really strong support with Democrats, independents, and something the way we kind of talk about this one is even among GOP voters and GOP primary voters, they don't want federal funding cut from early learning programs. They're in a very cut mood here in DC, but early learning programs are not one of the things voters want to see cut or GOP voters. And the strongest proponents of increased federal funding for early learning programs really comes from some of those key swing voters, younger voters, African American voters, Hispanic voters, some of those key voting blocks that both parties rely on in different ways, really want to see that increased funding for early learning programs. So it becomes a general election issue for them. And they will face some consequences if they try to eliminate tax credits for childcare. They're talking a lot about taxes right now. A lot of it not great, but they are one of the ways that we've been talking about is the CDCTC is a way that they can help working families right now, help afford the cost of childcare by expanding it. Hasn't been expanded since '01, I think, '01 or '05. Childcare has gotten a wee bit more expensive since then. So these are really popular proposals, and folks don't want to see them cut. Oop, no. Let's see. There we go. Um, so supporting these proposals can help a candidate or it can harm them. If they aren't supporting these proposals, voters are less likely to vote for them and more likely to oppose them. Across the board, we see that as well, even with independent men, which was a nice number for us to be able to point to. And voters largely believe that these proposals are important priority for as many as important as securing the border and stopping the increase of crime. Childcare and early learning are never going to be issues like cost of living or um, the border that are top of mind for voters or top of the news cycle. But seeing that even 50% of GOP primary voters thought this was just as an important priority for working families as securing the border is a big talking point for us and really demonstrates the impact early learning and childcare has on day-to-day lives of working families. So, voters want action. Fully 94% of Americans view the ability of working parents to be able to find and afford quality child care as a crisis or a problem. I think we hear a lot of talk these days about all the things that are in crisis or in a problem, but people really understand that childcare and the issues that families are facing have major problems. Especially true among GOP voters, independent voters, Democrats, even GOP primary voters, 91% recognize that this is a problem. And one of the groups that really stands out, and this has been a really helpful talking point for us, younger voters are living and breathing this issue day in and day out as they're having kids, trying to afford childcare for their kids. And roughly two-thirds, so 61% of GOP primary voters either themselves or someone they know have delayed having kids because of the costs associated with childcare. Every time we've talked about this number, I've even circled it here, we see staff circling that number. The cost of childcare is becoming impediment for people to grow their families or start their families in the way that they want because childcare is so expensive. And a strong majority of GOP primary voters, especially those younger and female, who are parents, say it's important for Trump and the GOP Congress to have a plan to work on quality childcare issues. So again, voters not only understand that it's important, but they want Congress and Trump to have a plan to do something about it. And across party lines, they believe it's important for congressional candidates to support these policies. So they're not going to face backlash if they actually work with the other side to get something done on this issue. And once again, it is an important issue at the ballot box. Increasing federal funding makes them more likely, voters more likely to support a candidate, and trying to cut federal funding for these childcare early learning policies makes them less likely to vote for a candidate. And once again, they want their members, they're okay with their members of Congress working across the aisle on this. They're not going to face political backlash if they work with the other side to get something done on this issue. So, some of the key messaging takeaways that we learned as well. In terms of the pro-family policies that we hear a lot of talk from the Trump and Republicans in Congress talk about, people really right now, they look at inflation reduction, cost of living. Those are the issues that are popping for them. So we have to continue to associate those childcare costs with that cost of living, with the ever increasing rate of inflation, because as everyone on this call knows, inflation is rising. The inflation rate within childcare and early learning is even higher than it is for other goods and services. And you see that childcare cost really pops for voters once you make that connection. Families are struggling with their own finances. I don't need to tell anyone on this call how much families are struggling nationally with their own personal finance situation. There's obviously a little more optimism about the future, at least when we took this poll from some of the GOP primary voters. Don't know if that sentiment's still there given the last couple of weeks, but um, we've seen that families really, when they talk about those personal finances, they're talking about healthcare costs, they're talking about taxes, they're talking about education. But when you talk about cutting, or excuse me, not cutting, but talking about childcare costs and early learning programs, people with kids under 5, people with kids under 18 really see holding down the costs of childcare or providing more children with access to early learning and childcare programs really pops for those with people that are living and breathing it. It becomes one of the most ties really in with their education. They are living and breathing the cost of early learning and childcare and education. Fully one quarter of parents are struggling to pay for childcare, and more than one third say they can't save or get ahead financially due to the cost of childcare. Really see that with GOP primary voters as well, struggling to pay for childcare costs, nearly 20% of them. And then not being able to save money is a big one. They're not able to, car breaks down, AC goes out, something happens. Cost of childcare really prevents them from having that financial flexibility to deal with those situations. We've heard that a
And
lot.
Joe, as you're there was a question. Can you show the slide about how well off people feel about their own income? I think it's back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yep. So
I know
going
you're
back here.
flying through because we have 30 minutes, but
Yes. And I wanted to leave some time for questions at the end. Sorry, I can't keep it
I
short.
can integrate them in. We have a few in the chat, but yeah,
Great.
so maybe a little bit more about this slide.
Yeah. So right now, and again, this poll was taken end of January. We saw voters were, especially GOP voters, were optimistic about where they thought the economy was going to go. Don't know where that is right now, but everyone across the board was not feeling great about their own personal financial situation. And that ties in, so you can see that, only fair, poor, not a lot of folks are feeling great. Very few people feeling excellent about their financial situation. So, really, everyone across the board is struggling with it. And then if you actually tie that back with the cost of childcare, 33% among GOP primary voters and 36% nationally not being able to save because of the cost of childcare is a problem. I mean, and we've heard this in focus groups, car breaks down, AC goes out,
Right.
something happens, you don't have that cushion, you don't have that flexibility.
Right.
Um, yeah.
I mean, not great, but thanks.
But thankfully, as we advocate for Congress and federal government doing more and investing more in early learning and childcare, there's voters have already made that connection between strengthening the economy and economy improving and by investing in childcare and early learning. It doesn't take much when we say next, please tell me whether you agree or disagree with the following statements and proposals if they'll help the economy. Those proposals being the childcare and early learning ones I mentioned, like federal investment, CDCTC, CTC, stuff like that. People made the connection real fast that this would help lower the cost for working families. Fully 78% of GOP primary voters, 92% of Democrats, 85% nationally. all thought this would help lower the cost for working families, and fully 71% nationally and even 66% of GOP primary voters thought this would help improve the economy. So the voters have already drawn the line between investing in early learning and childcare. Goes a long way in helping the economy and helping lower the cost for working families. So we have to keep making that association for them and for lawmakers that this is in making helping families afford childcare goes a long way in helping them afford the ever-growing cost of living. So let's see, and then um, we've got a lot of members from rural districts, especially in leadership, and people understand that childcare in rural areas is incredibly difficult, and that improving quality childcare in those communities will go a long way in helping them. Fully 71% of GOP primary voters, so making that rural connection is incredibly helpful. And then some of the cost of living ones, not shocking to I think anyone on here, telling people outright how much it costs, especially people that aren't paying it every month. On average, $1,200 a month for one child to have childcare goes a long way in making them more likely to support childcare policies and initiatives. Fully almost 50% of GOP primary voters, 61% nationally. And then um, one of the messages we tested that went really well was if you learn that nearly 40% of a single parent's income is currently being spent on childcare. That really popped for voters, 54% of GOP primary voters, 78% of independent women. Um, so you can see that these messages, when we really tie them to the cost of living, goes a long way in helping people become more supportive of childcare and early learning policies. So with that, I'm happy to dive into the chat on any questions or take additional questions. I know I
Joe,
flew
thank
through
you so
quickly.
much for flying through. And as Neri wrote in the chat, Joe sent me the slides. We'll post them in the follow-up folder. Um, Tom Weber has several questions. He said it's really smart to use a Republican pollster. We've learned that too in Massachusetts. The cost of living economic development works well for GOP voters. How does it work with independents and Democrats?
It works really well. And they've already made that association, thankfully. You can see, go back a couple of slides here. You can see with Democrat, so I'll give you Democrats here. 92% understand that these policies and initiatives, so things like the CDCTC, will help lower the costs, and 80% of Democrats think it'll help improve the economy. So you can see that already they've made those associations. And then if I go to the messaging one, 74% of Democrats, when you tell them how much childcare actually costs, makes them more likely to support childcare policies. So works well with Dems and independents as well.
And then Neri also noted we had over 100 people on a Monday morning call, which is great. Do GOP voters and or voters generally recognize Head Start as early learning, or do they see it somehow as different?
Yeah, so we did not test Head Start in this polling. We're actually gearing up to do more Head Start polling, so will happily circle up
And
after
come
all of
back.
that. I can tell you from some old polling that we've done that yes, they do recognize Head Start as part of early learning and it is popular. But that was all polling that we did probably in 2023. So we're
Wow.
going to update some of that. But yes, in our older polling, we've seen Head Start continue to be pretty popular across the board.
And you kind of indicated this. So the environment is so dynamic. Do you think there have been any shifts since January?
Yeah, sure hope so.
Right.
Yeah, I think we'll continue to be in the field. I would assume there's been some shifts, but that Republican base is pretty locked in. So that's why I think a lot of this, especially around the policy initiatives and around debt and deficit, is so applicable even now.
Last week, we had JD Chesloff from the Massachusetts Business Roundtable who did surveying of his members, and he did it after the election, but before inauguration, and then after inauguration. And there were big differences kind of in feelings. So we can only imagine kind of what the poll might show. Okay. Hi, Joe. Earlier this year, right after the inauguration, I watched a video where FFYF broke down this poll And I was really struck by how even young Republicans and rural voters are saying childcare costs are a huge burden. With so much bipartisan support, even from conservative voters, how is FFYF making sure this actually turns into real action in Congress, especially with all the usual hesitations about increasing federal spending? Well,
Great question. Love that question. Yes, we are advocating every day up on the Hill. We actually have a bunch of organizations and providers coming in actually tomorrow. I'm
yeah.
currently in Packet Land, getting ready to lobby up on the Hill and make sure that we're talking about these policy initiatives. So we're doing a lot of that work. We have work that we also do on a C4 side in district and in states to encourage this. And I just shared in the chat the
Thank you.
CDCTC action toolkit that we have. Has plenty of tools in there for folks to write, tweet at, share a letter to the editor about these issues. But it really is important that we keep, as they're in the middle of this reconciliation process, keep the drumbeat up, encouraging people to keep thinking about childcare as they're having these conversations on the Hill.
And then is there any new polling data on the on childcare cost perception from retirees or grandparents?
No, we do have this broken down by age. Let me see if I had a good age. One. Let me see here. I'll send it when I send over, but we do have
Okay.
even older voters. We were seeing very supportive of these initiatives. Let me go back. See if that we put that in there. I'll include some of the older voters, but
Okay.
we've seen pretty popular support even among older voters or 55 plus voters.
And then have you noticed any policymakers who are particularly interested in taking these results and running with them?
Yeah, there's actually a really good bipartisan bill in the Senate from Senator Kane and Senator Britt from Alabama that actually has all the big child care tax provisions and has a supply side grant bill as well lumped into it. So we've seen them really work hard on the Senate side advocating for child care policies. So and this year when they reintroduced their bill, they added, I believe it was 9 additional co-sponsors. So, and they kept it even between Dems and Republicans. So, seeing them do a lot of good work, hustling their members to get on board.
And then one of the potential outcomes of high costs of childcare is deregulation. We've seen this in a few states. Much of the data here can actually be used to support deregulation. How do you think about countering this narrative?
So we actually make it very clear, and this is how we always phrase it in the poll. We always talk about quality childcare. We always talk about quality early learning. We make sure when we talk about it, and especially in how we talk about cost, we talk about affordability. We do not talk about lowering the cost because lowering the cost is often associated with lower quality or deregulation. So we always talk about making childcare more affordable, which is federal investment. Because you're absolutely right. We don't want any of this to be associated with some of that negative deregulation that we've seen in some of those state ledge bills that I know you're
Welcome
referencing.
to the September installment of hold on. I just was trying to find the Brit Kane bill and I found a video, which I'll put in the chat. We often hear, well, childcare centers should just raise their rates from people who do not understand the landscape of childcare business. Is there any polling or messaging measuring people's understanding of the reasoning behind the high cost of childcare?
Um, Oh, not I think straight polling. We definitely have in some of our focus groups that especially the ones that we did last year, people understand the need for quality and the teachers and what goes into that. I think they so often when we talk about quality, they do associate it with having those good educators in the classroom, having enough educators in the classroom or in the center. So we've seen it through focus groups, and again, I don't, generally when you talk about people in childcare, they're not wanting to send their kid to somewhere that they think is quote unquote cheap. So they really do make those good connections, but it's usually through focus groups, and I don't have any direct polling on it. But that's a good one that we will keep in mind.
And then it's so important to know this issue is receiving bipartisan support. I'm curious whether the poll included perspectives from educators and family childcare providers, especially on how challenging it is to make a living with the low wages in the early childhood sector.
Yeah, we've done in the past on that. This one did not, but we've got the some polling from last year, people are supportive of their uh, early childhood educators getting paid more. I was actually we were doing some work in with some of the folks in Missouri. We had some folks, even just some of the parents that we brought on unprompted, talking about the need to pay their childcare providers more. So I think it's very real for the folks that are living and breathing it. And some of our past polling has included, especially the need for paying providers more.
And then, Joe, in our 1 minute left, can you just talk about the polling process? So you work with pollsters, and can you just talk about how that all happens? How do they get a representative sample? How is it delivered?
Yeah, so we try to find good pollsters that are really baked into, especially like this one that have worked with a lot of members of Congress or senators, respected on the Hill, and then they'll do national polling that'll be a mix of online, live respondent from phones, both cell phones and landlines, to get us a good representative sample. We do a little higher samplings than everyone. We usually do about N 1,000, and we did almost 1,000 for just the GOP primary voters. So. We try to make sure that we always have a good representative sample and that we have that it's a good tool for us to take up on the Hill and convince lawmakers because they love polling.
I do love polling. And I guess one question is kind of when you think about from now until the midterms, what does that look like for your work plan when you think about polling? And will any of
Yeah,
the questions change? Any of those pieces? Thanks.
yeah, I think it's always changing. I think we'll always keep seeing that being able to make that connection to the economy and cost of living so important. We hope to continue to do polling throughout the next couple of years, especially as we head into the midterm elections, so that lawmakers understand that this is an issue that matters to voters and is a way that they can connect with voters. So we hope to keep doing that, and of course, use it to defend and to help protect and prioritize key early learning programs, everything from Head Start to CCDBG.
Joe, wow, 10 on 1. You crammed a lot of information in. We really appreciate it. And thank you for your offer to kind of add the slide and send them over to us. Folks are joining me in the chat, so thank you for joining us. And just want to reiterate how grateful we are for national partners like you as we think about our work at the state level. We're advocating right now for our state budget, but we know how incredibly important the federal level work is, and all the expertise that first 5 years fund brings to that. So thank you so much, Joe, and please come back anytime.
Thanks for having me. It was great to see all of you. Best of luck at the Capitol.
Thank you. And tomorrow we're going to actually hear from Diane Gerard from Child Care Aware of America, who's going to talk about the public-private partnerships and some work they've just done in that. All right, we will see everybody. Well, and also the Red Sox are in a tear. So let's just say opening day was a success. Yesterday, doubleheader. We'll see what the rest of the week brings. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.